Hello everyone, welcome to the Jacksonville History Show, brought to you by the Jacksonville Historical Society and Comcast. Later we'll preview the Tales of Our City Cemetery Tour. But first we welcome Chris Hand, co-author, along with former Governor, former Senator Bob Graham, of America, the Owner's Manual, Making Government Work for You. Chris, welcome.
Harry, thanks for having me today.
Very interesting book and very useful to people who are maybe frustrated with their government and want to try to make some changes. How did the idea of doing this book get started?
Well, Harry, it's a project that sort of had its genesis 35 years ago. Senator Graham, one of the things he's very well known for is his work days. He did more than 400 of them when he was a candidate for governor, and then a United States Senator. And the first one he did, back when he was actually in the state Senate, was as a teacher at Carroll City High School in Miami, where he taught government and civics for a semester to high school students there. He sort of saw in that experience, and has seen in subsequent experiences, after he left office, he taught a freshman seminar at Harvard, that whereas when we do teach civics in this country, and that's less and less than it used to be, but when we do teach civics in this country, we teach it as a spectator sport, not as a participatory sport. So what happens a lot of times is, whereas some people might know the three branches of government, might have some understanding of the Constitution, what they don't know is how to effectively influence their local government on changing a school boundary or cleaning up a local lake. This book was a product of that sort of history and a desire to make sure that every citizen understands the different ways in which they can influence government at every level.
And government is not, or should not at least, be a spectator sport. It's something that requires citizen participation. But increasingly, I think, citizens are frustrated or angry or apathetic about government, and maybe think there's no use in trying to fight City Hall. And what do you say?
Well, I think that's a very common sort of theme and feeling among the public, and that's one of the ways we tried to present this book, was not just to say, I mean, the book sort of has a two-tiered approach. One of those approaches is to say, you know, here are 10 different skills you need to master in order to effectively influence government, help to engage government, and get it to enact the policies that you're interested in seeing as made part of the government. But the way we do that is not just by saying, here are the skills and here's how you employ them. It's also by showing examples of citizens and citizens groups around the country who have effectively used those skills in order to sort of change the way government works. And there's a few from right here in Florida. For example, one of the ones we talk about is the example of Barbara Capitman, who was a civic leader in the Miami area, who essentially is almost single-handedly responsible for the restoration of the historic South Beach area. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, there was an effort being made to demolish the old Art Deco structures in South Beach and replace them. She led a movement that ultimately led to those structures being placed on the National Register of Historic Places. She did that not backed by thousands of people or huge moneyed interests. She did that because she strongly believed in it and took the time to educate herself on what do I need to do to effectively influence government here, and had a positive result.
Viewers ought to know you're an attorney with Terrell Hogan now, and but before that, you worked with Bob Graham.
Correct.
For many years. And so you've experienced some of this yourself in terms of interacting with citizens and so forth.
Well, and the book, while Senator, you know, I sort of feel a little bit like the basketball player who talks about the night that he and Wilt Chamberlain combined for 51 points. Senator Graham brings decades of experience in this, but I bring some time and service to the public as well, and we've sort of tried to combine our experiences into this book to sort of help give people a roadmap, because I think that's a lot of times what people are missing when they're trying to sort of change the way government works. They have the passion, they have the particular emotion that often fuels sort of interest in government, but may not have either the examples or the roadmap as to how to do that. And that's what we've tried to supply in this book, Harry.
And the book, in some detail, explains exactly what you need to do. You know, one of the things, just in terms of organizing and fact-finding, and so that you know what you're talking about and get your message straight, and the media. Media is a very critical part of this.
Well, it's extremely important. Again, we tried to sort of provide a variety of examples from around the country, but both of us being from Florida, tended to fall back on those. There's a gentleman discussed in the media chapter of the book named Max Rameau again, from the Miami area, who is extraordinarily effective in getting media attention to the causes that he cares about. His story was actually provided in the book by Tom Fiedler, who's the former executive editor of the Miami Herald. And it's a very, very interesting example of how someone, again, who doesn't have a huge infrastructure can get great media attention on the subjects they care about. And that's interesting in the world we face today, Harry, because as you know, being a former media person yourself, the media is incredibly varied, much more so than it has been at any point in history. In the book, for example, we talk about obviously the importance of television and newspapers and radio as media sources, but there's this new thing, or relatively new thing, called the internet, which in itself has become a tremendous media source. And all sorts of outlets that we haven't thought of as media before are places where citizens can influence public opinion.
And some people have the same attitude about media that they have about government, that they have no chance of getting their voice heard. And sometimes, yeah, I guess you have to have perseverance in both cases, with politicians and with the media.
I think perseverance is part of it, and also education is an important part of it. Knowing the way we sort of have written the book, Harry, is very much a step-by-step. First, define the problem. Figure out exactly what it is you're trying to change in influencing and interacting with government. Second thing is do your research. Make sure you have the statistics and information and other sort of documentation you need to be able to present an effective case. And the third part of that is figure out what level of government deals with your problem. If you're interested in changing Social Security, you probably don't want to go to the Jacksonville City Council, which has jurisdiction over that. In fact, the book starts, one of the things we talk about, and part of the inspiration for this is when he was in the state Senate, Senator Graham had a town hall meeting with other members of the state Senate at Wolfson High School, probably not 2 miles from the studio where we sit today, in which he sort of solicited students' opinions on education. And one of the students came up to him afterwards, several of the students came up to him afterwards, and he asked, what are your major concerns? And they complained about the quality of the food in the cafeteria there. And he was a little bit concerned because, he said, well, what made you think the state legislature would necessarily have the ability to change that? And who else have you talked to? And they said, well, we've talked to the mayor and we've talked to the sheriff, who's told us that while he's sure the food is bad, it's probably not criminal. And so that was one of those incidents early in his career that made him think we've got to do a better job giving people a sense of where sort of governmental decisions are made so that we can then tell them how to affect those decisions.
Jacksonville has some history with kind of grassroots movements, people taking matters into their own hands when government doesn't act. And it might be an example of people, if people think they're disheartened and there's no chance, it has happened in Jacksonville.
Well, and there's actually significant examples in recent history. For example, in 2000, just a decade ago, there was an effort made to pass a tree ordinance for the city, protect some of our natural treasures here in town. That was a citizen-led movement pushed by citizens and overwhelmingly adopted by the voters as an amendment to the city charter. So that's a recent example. Another recent example is, and regardless of what side you're on, it's a testament to the power of grassroots organizing, some of the efforts being made about the proposals related to the Trail Ridge landfill. There's been activism on a variety of sides of that, and that I think has also shown some of the power of organizing. There are those who say that the activities by groups like the Jacksonville Young Democrats and others last year had a lot of influence on the outcome of that proposal ultimately with the City Council. We're seeing it right now in some of the efforts to help persuade Governor Christ to try and veto a bill related to the hiring and retention of teachers. Right now there's a huge movement among teachers. So I think you see these types of movements a lot here in Northeast Florida.
We've had billboards,
correct,
billboard regulations that probably would not exist if it hadn't been for people willing to try to fight City Hall, and term limits.
Those are all very powerful examples. And I think what I hope those examples, and I'm glad you're raising them, Harry, what I hope they do, and certainly it's the case with the ones we've put in the book, is we'll tell people that others have done this before. You're not alone. You're not doing something unprecedented. Others before have taken these steps and grabbed the reins of government, because after all, it's our government. We're the people.
But is it harder today? I think people may perceive that, and maybe that accounts for some of the apathy and anger, harder today than it was back in the days when we were fighting for billboard regulation and term limits. And maybe that's a phenomenon of the technology. Technology may make it easier, but it also may make it harder.
Well, I'm not sure if I can assess whether it's easier or harder. I do know there are maybe different challenges and opportunities, and you've addressed a key one with technology. I mean, the advent of initiatives like Facebook and Twitter and other things that are sort of internet-based, I think in many ways have made it easier for people to interact with government. One of the stories we talk about in the book is 2 years ago in the state legislature, there was a proposal to change the way Bright Future scholarships were handed out. A University of Florida student was upset about this, set up a Facebook group to protest it. Within about a week, had 20,000 followers on Facebook, and the sponsor of the bill in the state Senate decided he was going to pull back because of this response. So I think in that sense, it can be a very powerful tool. Some might argue that the downside of it is there's so much internet activism these days that, you know, if it's not done effectively, one can get lost in the shuffle. But we try and talk in the book about how to sort of do that type of grassroots organizing via the internet in an effective way.
The book is in the Jacksonville Public Library. That's where this one came from. And also available, how would someone buy a copy of that?
Primarily on Amazon.com. It's where it's being published by CQ Press, and the primary place that I think people can buy it is on Amazon. And I'm very pleased it's in the Jacksonville Public Library as well.
Now, as the co-author of this book, one might wonder if there are any particular issues that you're ready to go out and circulate petitions for and campaign for.
Well, this is an issue all to itself, and one that I feel very passionate about, which is how do we increase the civic engagement of our citizens in this country. In fact, there's a bill pending before the legislature right now which would actually add testing on civics to a variety of tests that students take every year. I think that's very important that we make civics again more and more a part of our school curriculums, and help to educate people not just on the spectator side of democracy, but also the participatory side of democracy. This is a particular issue that I feel a lot of passion about.
Civics has gotten lost in the curriculum, hasn't it?
It has, and I will give the legislature credit. In recent years, they have added a new civics requirement at the middle school level. Hopefully this year they're going to add a testing requirement. So I think the Florida legislature has maybe been more responsive than some to some of these issues about the importance of civics.
Chris Hand, thank you for being with us on the Jacksonville History Show.
Harry, thanks so much for having me.
And next on our show, Emily Liska and a preview of the Tales of Our City Cemetery Tour. Stay with us.